I look exactly the same as I did in my travel room video because I'm filming this video 2 seconds after finishing that one. I hope you guys don't mind. Hi everyone, my name is Alia. Welcome or welcome back to my YouTube channel. Here on It Is That Deep, actually, I try to encourage people to think more critically about things, and so far my videos have been very pop culture focused. I did a video about Sydney Sweeney and the rise of white supremacy in 2025, and I also did one about Chapo Roan and the recent situation with her in Brazil. But I think my video hopefully has a little bit of insight on nuance and about critical thinking and stuff. Watch the video if you're interested. Today's video is not about pop culture, actually. Today's video is about something else that I'm really interested in, passionate about, which is books, which is reading, which is literature. I love books. I have loved books for a really long time. I was that kid in middle school who always had a book with her, and I really miss that kid sometimes, and I wonder where she went, because I used to just always have a book with me, and at any point in time during the day when I was bored, when we had a minute in class, when I finished my assignment, I would be pulling out my book and reading it. It's crazy because that's basically what I do with my phone now, so it kind of sucks that happened. I used to read so much. This is kind of gross, but every single one of my books would end up having some sort of stain on it because I would be eating while I read, and I was, I guess, not the most coordinated person ever. I don't know if I should have shared that, whatever. Because of that, I have a lot of favorite and nostalgic books from my childhood that I love. And recently I've been in quite a bit of a reading slump. I don't even know if you can call it a reading slump when it's gone on for like years. I think I just have been so short on time, especially during the school year. I feel like I just like have no time to read. And the times that I do have as like a break, I immediately revert to social media because it's a lot easier on the brain. So especially because the books that I want to read are like classics and like nonfiction and like more like difficult to read literature. Like I do read some romance here and there, but the books that I like in my head really want to read are like more difficult books. So it's really hard for me to, after a long day of class, pick up like a book by Dostoevsky versus like my phone and scroll on Instagram. Anyway, the point of this video is to share with you some of my favorite books from my childhood that I think everybody should read, because these are books that I think anyone can get value out of, even if they're a children's book. Themes might be a little more mature, or I think there's just lessons in them that we can all learn. I do have to give a quick disclaimer that I frankly don't really remember what a lot of these books are about, because they are books from my childhood and I'm currently not a child. I'm 18, so I'm basically a child, but all these books like I read like at least 10 years ago, and I haven't really revisited a lot of them. So most of this video is going to be me saying I don't remember exactly what this book is about, but I know it was really good. But I can talk about like the general themes and ideas that are in them. And some of these books you probably heard of, others you might not have heard of. Obviously, like I wasn't reading like the most niche books ever as a kid, but I do have some picks on here that hopefully maybe you haven't heard of and you can try them out. I think kids' books can be a great way to get out of a reading slump because they're often written really simply and they're about themes that we are very comfortable with and like familiar with, like, friendship or love or family or whatever. And they're really short, so you can knock out a book in a day, in a few hours. Basically, if you're in a reading slump like me, maybe read a kid's book. Maybe it'll help you get out of it. And honestly, I should take my own advice and read one of these books because they are all very important to me as a kid. So let's get into it. That was a really long intro. I hope no one has clicked off the video by now. I know people have. People do that on YouTube. I didn't realize how many people did that on YouTube until I started doing this, because when I click on a YouTube video, I low-key always watch it through. But maybe that's just me. Do other YouTubers, like, how do you guys, like, read off of a script or, like, a list while not looking at it? Like, I feel like I'm always looking at my freaking thing because I'm not memorizing a whole YouTube video script. Maybe you guys have, like, a teleprompter. Maybe I need to invest in a teleprompter. Everyone can relax. I found the list of books. Okay, the first book on this list is kind of a niche poll. I want to say it's literally not. I think it won like an award or something, but it's Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. This book we read it in my 4th grade class, like as a whole class, like my teacher would read it out to us and we were invested. I remember being so invested in this book and loving it so much. And I liked it so much that we didn't actually finish the book when I was in 4th grade. So I made my parents buy me a copy so that I could like read it on my own. This book is about a little girl who lives in like this really poor like village on like a mountain in, I think it's implied to be like ancient China, and she goes on like this big quest to fulfill like a prophecy about a dragon in order to like bring prosperity to her land. And I think it's inspired by a lot of like different ancient Chinese folk tales, because there's a lot of kind of like mini little stories. It's a very like classic adventure quest type of novel. Like she goes on a quest, she meets all these fun creatures, fun people, and learns a lesson at the end of it essentially. It's a very cute book, very heartfelt, I think, and it's really fun if you're into like mythology and like stories. I was so into that as a kid. There were a couple stories in this book that I was like always thinking about as a kid. There's one about like this evil magistrate who gets turned into an evil tiger, and it low-key freaked me out as a kid, but in retrospect it's just such a cool concept. And I don't know how much of the book the author based in like actual mythology versus how much she kind of like extrapolated and made her own, but it's a very cool read, and I definitely would recommend if you were like a Percy Jackson kid, you would like this book. Next up is one that I feel like we've all probably heard of. A lot of these books were on my school curriculum, so like you've probably heard of them or read them. But if you read these books in school, I would recommend reading them again because I feel like you just get something out of them when you reread books for fun and you are able to do what you want with them rather than having to write an essay about a specific prompt. This book is The Outsiders. I think we all have heard of The Outsiders. This book is about like two different kind of groups of like kids. There's like I don't remember their names. I think one of them is called the Socks, if I'm right, but there's like the rich kids and like the poor kids. There's the rich kids and there's like the not rich kids. And they kind of like fight, and it's about like them and like teenagers and friendship and loyalty and that kind of thing. We read this book in 7th grade, I remember, and then we also watched the movie. And in the movie, Danny, I want to say, is that his name, calls Johnny a little shit. And I think that was the first time we'd ever been exposed to cursing in media that was given to us by school. And so, as you can imagine, my 7th grade class went batshit crazy to hear the S word in like a movie that our school was showing us. And I remember writing in my diary, I wrote like, Danny called Johnny a little shit. And that's crazy. So, if you want to see something absolutely scandalous, watch the movie. But it's a really great book. I can't believe this book was written when the author was 16 years old. I can't imagine. Like, that's crazy. Oh my God. I can only dream. But I'm sure you've heard of The Outsiders. It's won lots of awards. It's very famous. But you should still read it if you haven't or if you don't remember it very well. Okay, the next book is one of my personal favorites. It's like one of the first books that I really remember reading on my own, and so it holds like a really special place in my heart for that, and that is Tuck Everlasting. I read this book when I was in 4th grade because my teacher, I used to go to Kumon, throwback. I used to go to Kumon when I lived in New York, and when I left my Kumon center, my teacher, or like the center director or whatever, she loved me so much that she gave me a copy of Tuck Everlasting and wrote a little note in it. It was so sweet. And so because of that, that book was like really close to my heart. And then I read it, obviously, and I loved it. It's just such a good book. It's about this family who discovers this like fountain in the woods that keeps them immortal forever. And then there's like this little girl named Winnie, and she doesn't have any friends. She's like very lonely, and she meets this family, and she becomes really close with their like son and all this stuff. And it's kind of about her struggle about like, should I drink the water? Should I become immortal? Should I not? Like this whole thing. It's such a good story. It's about like time and family and growing up and aging, and it's just such a good book. And I think for a kid to read too, it's like very interesting for a kid to read it. I think I would probably get something different out of it if I read it now to when I read it when I was in 4th grade and I didn't really care about growing up, or I kind of wanted to grow up. So I don't know, I really recommend. And this book did circle around later because it was in my 6th grade class curriculum. I didn't read it because I'd already read it. So you might have heard of it or you might have read it for school, but I would really, really recommend because I didn't read it for school when I read it, and I just like adored that book. It was so good. That reminds me, the book that I did read in 6th grade was Bridge to Terabithia. I know y'all have heard of that book. I know you guys have heard of it because it is so good and it is so sad. Bridge to Terabithia is a book about these two little kids, and they kind of invent this whole like fantasy world called Terabithia, and they like play in it, and then it's very sad at the end. But you should read that book. You should watch the movie. Josh Hutcherson is in the movie. It's great. That was the book that I read, and it's about like, friendship and loss and love and stuff. So Tuck Everlasting, Bridge to Terabithia, would recommend both of them. Yeah, both of them also kind of have this very like, I mean, obviously most of these do because they're kids' books, but they have like a very kind of whimsical and naive way of looking at the world that I think we could learn from and we could think about. And obviously, in Bridge to Terabithia, kind of the naive worldview that the main character has is shattered a little bit by like the tragedy that happens. But I think that's like, it's interesting to look at with like a grown-up perspective on what does it mean to like lose that barrier of innocence and how can we still maintain it even after terrible things happen. Okay, that was all. This is all straight from the old noggin because I don't have a script or anything. So if you hear me say something really insightful in this video, it's all me. It's all me on the fly. I don't like that I said that. Okay. All right, the next book. I know I just said Tuck Everlasting was one of my favorites. This one low-key might be my favorite because I think, let me not, like I'm going to say this about every book, but the next book is A Wrinkle in Time. Ooh, I love this book so much. This actually might be the first book I remember reading now that I'm thinking about it, because I really, really, really clearly remember reading this book. If you've never heard of Wrinkle in Time, it's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of like a sci-fi kids book, which is very cool. It's about this girl. Her name is Meg. She's kind of a loser, and her dad was, he worked for NASA, I believe, and then he died, except they never found his body, and she doesn't really know what they were working on, so it's kind of like a mystery. And she has like a little brother who's like kind of a genius and like very strange and kind of like he only talks to her, but he's very smart, but he doesn't like to talk to other people and stuff. He becomes friends with these three strange women named Mrs. Who? I can't remember their names. Okay, but he meets these like three women who are kind of like supernatural creatures, and he and her sister, like the main character, and also her love interest, like another boy from her school, kind of end up going on this quest, and they go through like different dimensions and different like planets, and it's very cool. And because, like I said, it is sci-fi, they do a little bit of like explaining of the fifth dimension, which was very interesting. They talk about a tesseract, and at the age of literally, I was in third or fourth grade when I was reading this. I had no idea. Like, I didn't understand. They were trying to explain like how a tesseract works. They use this really interesting like metaphor of like an ant. So like, if you have like a cloth and like an ant going from here to here, the dimension kind of like folds the cloth and like brings it like that. I don't know if you could hear any of what I just said. That's what the fifth dimension is, or like that's what a tesseract is, something like that. And I kind of understood it, but kind of didn't. And because of that fact, because I didn't really understand dimensions and science. Well, I mean, I understood science, but like not like dimensions and stuff. I really want to go back and reread it just to kind of see if I can conceptualize it a little bit better. But even if you're unable to conceptualize that, because I wasn't able to as a kid, it is a kid's book, so like the author doesn't expect you to be a sci-fi expert or anything, and it's still super, super interesting. There's a lot of like imagery in this book that is very kind of not haunting, but like it really sticks with me. Like, I was just watching Alex Raz's video on spring books, and she mentions this book, and I got so excited because I love this book. And she was talking about, there's like one part where they go to a planet where everyone is exactly the same there, and there's a part where all the children come out of their houses and they're all like bouncing a ball at the exact same time, and it's so freaky. And there's other things that I don't really want to spoil or get into, but it's such a good book, and especially like the later half is so like it's just crazy, and I would reread it all the time as a kid. I would just be pouring over this book. And there was a part that really got to me as like an older sibling, where the younger sibling, his name is Charles, the little brother, he's like, they're in this like alternate dimension, and he gets very like scared and he like calls out for his sister, and it was just so like, it was so well written, so emotional. And like as an older sister, I used to reread that scene over and over again. I just loved it so much. Okay, let's not get emotional. But I do really like that book. And the great thing about that book is that it's actually a series. So the second book is called A Wind in the Door, and I read that book. And I also read the third book, which was called A Swiftly Tilting Planet. These titles go crazy, by the way. I did read A Swiftly Tilting Planet. It was super confusing. It involves a lot of time travel, so you meet a lot of her like ancestors and stuff, but I couldn't keep track of who was who. So I might want to reread that now that I have a bit more brain power in my cells, you might say. Basically, I would recommend that whole series. I think Madeline Langle, I don't know how to say her name, but she's a genius, and I adore her work so much. And she honestly has really inspired me as a reader and as a writer. So thank you to her. Would you guys be mad if I said this next book was also my favorite? Okay, let me not say anything, because I was going to say this might be the first book I've ever read, but I don't want to keep saying that, because that's probably not true. Little House in the Big Woods. Just thinking about this book makes my heart hurt. Like, this book is so good. It's a story, I think it's actually like a semi-biography, because I think the author like is Laura Ingalls Wilder, and it's a book about her life in the woods in like a very cold area, like in the winter with her family, and it's just like a really sweet little look at like a child's life. I don't really remember there being anything super tragic or sad happening, at least not in this book. I don't think I ever read the other ones. I think I read Little House on the Prairie, but I didn't read any of the other ones. And it's just like a really beautiful meditation on like a kid's life and about her stories and what she gets up to. A very good book to read in winter. I know in America we're just coming out of winter, so maybe you could wait until next year. But if you're anywhere else in the world, if you're in Australia, probably a great time to pick this book up. But it's just a very sweet read, and I remember just adoring it so much. And it's such a good thing about like family and love, so definitely would recommend. Okay, we're kind of getting into really popular book territory. I've kind of talked about all the books that I've had a really sentimental attachment to, except for one more. There's one more book that I have a really sentimental attachment to that I'm going to talk about, and the rest of them are kind of more like general recommendations that I think you might have heard of, but you should still read. The next book on this list is Charlotte's Web, and oh my god, I loved Charlotte's Web as a kid. Oh my goodness, I still love it now. This book is about a girl named, I forget her name actually, because the main character, the human, doesn't really matter. But she gets a pet pig named Wilbur, and the pet pig Wilbur meets a spider named Charlotte, and Charlotte is really smart, and Charlotte can read. So Charlotte starts like writing words on her web, and I think people like think the words are about the pig or something, and the pig becomes really famous, and it's a whole thing. Very, very sweet book. I do remember it having kind of a sad ending, but I can't put my finger on what the ending was. So maybe it's not that sad, and maybe my child brain just thought it was really sad, but I vaguely remember that. I remember it being really good, really a beautiful book about like friendship, and I like books that are about animals. I think that's kind of a lost art when you get to adult books, is you don't ever really see adult books written about animals. And honestly, that's always been kind of on my bucket list of novels that I want to write, is one like from the perspective of an animal, or maybe like set in like the forest, so it's just like kind of like about animals. maybe like a book that doesn't really involve humans at all. I feel like that could be so cool because you don't really see that in like adult books, which is kind of interesting. Maybe we'll make a video about that. That could be fun. That could be fun. Okay, we'll see. Definitely recommend this book. I can't remember too many details about the plot, which is why I'm not giving you any. I just remember it being really good. And I feel like it is really sad at the end, but maybe it's not. I don't know. Okay, next up we have more general books, like I said. First up, we have Dr. Seuss. Okay, I'm going to recommend some books by Dr. Seuss and by Roald Dahl. I believe one or both of them has to now be seen to be like either anti-Semitic or racist or both. Basically just like not good people. They're both long dead though, so I feel like it's fine. You can support them, whatever. You can buy the books. Like, it's not going to harm anyone directly if you're still reading Harry Potter. So, by Dr. Seuss, I'm going to recommend The Lorax because I know a lot of us have seen the movie, like the Disney movie. Was it Disney? I think it was Disney. A lot of us have seen that movie, but not a lot of us have read the actual book. And there's also like the original Lorax, which I believe is on YouTube. You should watch that too. Read the original Dr. Seuss book, like the book The Lorax, and just keep those ideas in mind. The world is dying, and unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, it's not going to get better. It's not. The Roald Dahl book that I would recommend above all else was the one that stuck out to me the most as a gifted kid, you might say, and that was Matilda. God, I love Matilda. It's just such a good book. If I talk about it for too long, I'll start crying because I always think of like the Harry Styles song now. It's such a wonderful book. As a kid, you don't really think about the like much deeper themes in Matilda. Like you recognize that Matilda's parents are mean and you recognize that Miss Trunchbull is mean, but you don't really recognize the extent to which the abuse goes. And it's like reading it back or even thinking about it, because I haven't read it since I was a kid, but just thinking about it, it just kind of like resonates so much more heavily once you're able to kind of conceptualize the extent to which her parents were probably harming Matilda, mentally, I mean. And obviously, it's a kid's book. It's written off as like comedy. Oh, her parents are so mean and they just yell at her and they don't care about her. But when you think about it like as an adult, it just kind of strikes so much deeper, I feel like. And it doesn't really come off as a comedy anymore, which is a very interesting kind of shift, I think, in the book. But I would still recommend it. If you've somehow never heard of Matilda, it's about this little girl. She's like 4 or something when the book starts, just entering kindergarten, but she's a genius because her parents are very mean and they just kind of watch TV all day. They leave her alone all day. So she makes her way to the library and she teaches herself to read all these super difficult books. And she's like a child prodigy. And then she goes to school and it's kind of like a whole thing. And it's just great. It's a wonderful book. And I have heard good things about the movie, but I've never seen it. So do with that what you will. I'm also going to recommend The Witches. I think it's called The Witches or The Witch. This one is like just kind of funny. It's not super dark or sad or anything. I mean, it's about witches, but like it's not that sad. It's just kind of a funny story about this little boy and his grandma, and they go like witch hunting and they stumble on this like convention of witches, and it's like I just really enjoyed it as a kid. James and the Giant Peach is a good one. That's the one about all the little bug creatures. I didn't read that one as a kid because I didn't like bugs, and so it kind of freaked me out, but I did reread it when I was a little bit older and I did like it. I think those were all the Roald Dahl books I had to recommend. The very last book on my list is one that I'm sure you've heard of or you vaguely know about or something. It's a really wonderful book, and I haven't actually finished the book, but I've watched the movie and I've heard the book is good. I know the book is good, and I would definitely recommend it, and that is The Little Prince. So The Little Prince is kind of hard to explain because, like I said, I watched the movie, but I haven't finished the book, so I don't really remember what exactly it's about, but I do know it's a story about like growing up and about like aging and about like losing that kind of childhood innocence that we all possess when we're young. And so it's a very interesting story. I'm sure, like, again, kind of similar to what I was talking about before, reading it as a child, you're going to have a much different experience to reading it now. So even if you did read it as a child, because I think a lot of us were exposed to this particular book in some way, shape, or form, but reading it now as like an adult or older with like your life experience, I feel like you might have a different take on it. That's how I feel about a lot of these books, because a lot of these books deal with themes of like growing up and like losing that childhood innocence or having that childhood innocence. And so like kind of looking back on it when you don't have those things is like a very interesting lens to take, if you will. Those were all of the books that I had to recommend. Honorary shout out to the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. I love that book series, and I recently just read the most recent installation in the book series because it's somehow still going. I will admit the newer books are not as good as the original ones. Not much to say on that front. That's kind of how it is. But, you know, we can still enjoy the new books. And I feel like it's just really nostalgic to me reading new Greg Heffley books. So I would recommend Diary of a Wimpy Kid. If you've never read it, it's like, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's written as this kid's diary. His name is Greg. He's kind of the worst person ever. But he writes like a diary and there's like little illustrations in it. And he has this very distinct way of speaking where he like, well, writing, I guess, where he capitalizes certain words. And my sister and I were talking about this recently. My sister was like, one time I wondered why I capitalize certain words when I write. And she was like, I realized it's the Greg Heffley style of writing. And I was like, you're cooking. That one's very fun. It's kind of similar to Dork Diaries, if you've ever read that. It's kind of like the boy counterpart to Dork Diaries. But I grew up on Diary of a Wimpy Kid, so it's not just for boys, obviously. And that one is really fun to look back on because some of the shit that goes on is just, it's bad shit. So just putting it out there if you remember that book series. Oh my gosh. Sorry. I just remembered Geronimo Stilton. Ooh, me and those fucking mouse books, bro. We were like this. I loved Geronimo Stilton, specifically the fantasy ones. There was like the whole series where he goes to this like fantasy land, and I had a copy of one of them, and that one had like maps of all the different fantasy worlds. Oh my god, I used to pore over those things, reading like every single little thing on the map. Geronimo Stilton, that's a weird ass book. It's just like about like a bunch of mice. Like it's like a country of mice, but they're like humanoid, like anthropomorphic mice, and it's just like his life, and it's like the way that he writes is also very interesting because there's like lots of like fonts, like the author likes to use different fonts and colors for the words, so it really like kind of comes to life, and it's really cool. I know a lot of people, specifically like girls, read the Thea Stilton books, which were about his sister. I never read the Thea Stilton books. I feel kind of left out because I feel like all the girlies read those, and I read Geronimo Stilton, which is, I guess, again like the boy version, but you know, none of that shit matters anymore. Read what you want. You can read anything you want. Honorary mentions for Geronimo Stilton and Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Dork Diaries, I guess, because they're all kind of kids' books. Okay, those were all the kids' books that I had to recommend to you. Please, please, whichever book of these sounds the most interesting, if I didn't do a good job of explaining, please Google them, and whichever one sounds the most interesting, just give it a read. It's a kids' book, so at most you're going to lose like an hour of your life, which you would have done on Instagram Reels today anyway. So please just do it. I promise you're not going to be disappointed. If you are interested in thinking more critically, developing your brain, all these really wonderful, amazing things, you should follow my YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube. Please do actually subscribe to my YouTube if you enjoyed this video at all. It's really helpful for the channel. It's really helpful for me because I am a college student who doesn't have any money and is doing this for fun and is just really hoping to reach people. So it would be great if you could let me know that I reached someone. Follow my Instagram for more content and also content about my book. I am currently writing a book. It's not a children's book. You know, I think it would be really cool to write a children's book one day. But that's not what I'm writing. But if you want to hear about what I'm writing, Instagram. And also follow my Substack for essays. A lot of the essays that I post on here, like the video essays, I turn them into actual essays and post them on Substack. So if you're into that, follow my Substack, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! Go read a book!